the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States, which in the last 2 days you see no attacks, American attacks on Iranians. And we had in the last 2 days, we had some attacks from Iran on Kuwait, on Bahrain, and on Saudi Arabia 2 days ago, on Saudi Arabia as well, with the case of logistics there. And then the new conflict between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, which is somehow complicating the whole case of the West Asia, because there was no attack between the two sides. There was a siege on Yemen for 12 years. Then Yemen came out and said, we're going to put an end to the siege by putting a blockade on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is under tremendous pressure because of the case of the Strait of Hormuz. And right now, and the Red Sea is somehow getting so critical for them. The Suez Canal is not that capable of providing them with the export that they need. This is the situation, Ray. The other point that is so important is the way that the two wars are somehow connecting to each other. The war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East. We had a Ukrainian attack on a cargo ship, Iranian cargo ship from Russia to Iran, which was some sort of escalation because we haven't that before. And the Iranian response, they said, we're gonna keep our right to respond to the attack. This is what's going on, Ray. And here is what Mike Waltz said about the stockpile in the United States and what does that mean for the ongoing conflict, on the ongoing war between the United States and Iran. Here is what he said, Ray.
Asked you about the assets. NBC News is reporting the Pentagon is actually rationing some defense weaponry amid diminishing supplies. Is America backing away from a larger military attack because its military stockpile has been depleted?
Well, look, we have to take a step back here in that a lot of stockpiles were depleted, not only from what we gave Ukraine over the last however many years, 4 or 5 years, and the administration inherited, the Secretary Hegseth inherited a depleted situation from not only Ukraine, but also the ongoing fight with the Houthis under the Biden administration and a depleted military under the Biden administration. So they have decided, one, they're going to new types of munitions, cheaper munitions, new technologies, but also with these new defense budgets, rebuilding our great military. However,
but you acknowledge
I want to be clear.
Do you acknowledge they're depleted, though, at this moment?
I want to be crystal clear. The U.S. military, and I've verified this every which way, has everything that it needs to conduct this campaign as effectively as it needs to be. And I have to tell you, the people that are leaking this nonsense deserve to be in jail.
Yeah.
He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, is he, Nima?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're depleted, but people spreading that rumor that we're depleted, they should be whatever. I mean, there it is. I mean, hello. You can blame the Biden administration. I mean, you can blame Bill Clinton. You can blame anybody, but, when this new president came in and he picked this crackerjack analyst, Mike Waltz, to be his national security advisor, okay, and then now he's shunted up to the UN. I mean, it would have seemed necessary for them to say, oh my God, let's take a look at our stockpiles. Let's see if we have enough Tomahawks and enough Patriots, and let's see if the Patriots work, and let's do the Iron Dome and Israel, see if that will work. Wait a second. You telling me that we don't have so many? Oh my God. That darn Biden. Well, let's go ahead anyway, see what happens. That's a famous Trump expression, right? Well, let's see what happens. Well, if the intelligence analysts were wise enough and courageous enough to tell their superiors, the Director of Central Intelligence and the Chief of National Intelligence, look, the Russians have all kinds of missilery, and so do the Ukrainians. They actually cooperated on some of this very sophisticated drone technology, and their precision won't quit. And so they're a pretty formidable match for whatever we have. Now, that's the line that intelligence analysts in the United States don't cross. They don't tell the president, well, we have. No? That's the military tells the president that. And when generals get promoted to 2, 3, 4 stars, they're just interested in schmoozing up to the president and retiring at a lot of money from Raytheon and General Dynamics to the rest of them. So the CIA may have done its job in talking about what formidable array of missiles the Russians have developed over the last 10 years when they gave up on negotiating any limits on anti-ballistic missiles or anything like that. 10 years. So the administration, in my view, was well advised about what the capabilities Russia had. Whether they were told the truth about stockpiles, I mean, here it is. What are we? The end of July, and now the president and Waltz are saying, "Oh yeah, well, the stockpiles are depleted." But it's Biden's fault. I mean, we started the war anyway, but it's Biden's fault still. So the bottom line is that the Russians and the Iranians didn't wait until the hostilities started. As you know better than I, Nima, over the last few decades, not years, the Iranians are building factories on the mountain. I mean, it boggles the mind, but that's what they've done, okay? They had that kind of time. And the Russians have been also doing the same thing, particularly since 2016, when they realized there's no chance at all of talking to the Americans about arms control. Now, what kind of advice has Trump been getting? Or well, let's start with Biden. Let's take Ukraine. And since I know a little bit about intelligence, let me just recite a couple things. 24 February 2022, the invasion of Ukraine. In my view, and I can support that with copious evidence, Putin decided he had no other option. We can discuss that later, okay? Now, what was the president told? Well, the president was told that this was a full-scale invasion, right? And it was unprovoked. Well, maybe he was dumb enough to believe that it was unprovoked. Maybe he didn't know the background of it. But full scale with 90,000 troops or maybe 100,000 up there right near Kiev, full scale? Give me a break. They were there to frighten the Ukrainians into negotiating. And what happened? They frightened them successfully and reached an agreement between one of Zelensky's best friends. His name is David Arachamia. He's until recently, I think he still is head of their faction in their parliament. And he negotiated a deal with his Russian opposite number. They initialed it in Istanbul, early April. And what about those full-scale troops, the 90 or 100,000 up there? Well, do you remember, Nima, when they were, I'm an infantry officer. I know what enfilade is, okay? You put all the trucks in a line on a highway that's straight, right? And you got one plane, you can decimate them all, right? That's where they were. Remember those photos? I never say, what the hell's going on here? We know what's going on now. Putin, he says, now this is, until now, this is a secret. But there's a fellow named Macron in France. He called me up. We have it on tape, says Putin. He called me up and said, look, it's a little embarrassing for the Ukrainians to appear to be having a gun at their head to negotiate. So we like the deal, let it go forward, but could you do a gesture of goodwill and please maybe just withdraw some of those troops up there near Kiev? And Putin says, what? Yeah, that's all I have to do. Just bring them back and we'll get the thing done. So Putin said, I had no reason to disbelieve him. As I said, I have it on tape. So that's what we did. Next thing you know, Boris Johnson comes in from Britain and says, no deal. That's not what it's all about. We're going to support you if you defy the Russians, if you don't send any deal, we'll support you for as long as it takes. Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because that's the Russian experience with how to trust the West. Macron, Boris Johnson, at very least, acting on part of the United States. So that happens in April of 2024. What does the head of national intelligence, Avril Haines, what does she say in December of 2024? We got it made. We got it made, Mr. Biden. No problem. The Russians, they're running out of ammunition. I'll say that again. This is a quote. They're running out of ammunition. The weapons that they're leaving on the front as they retreat, they can't replace them because they have no indigenous capability to build more weapons. I'll say that again. The Russians, says the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, this is December 2024. The Russians have no indigenous capability to produce the weapons they need of the kind that they're leaving helter-skelter on the battlefield. Now, what happens next? And I'll finish with this here. In early summer, the head of CIA now, right under the DNI, he goes to Kiev, and he says, how's it going there, Volodymyr Zelensky? Tell me, I'm going to see the president up in Helsinki just a little while. And Zelensky says, oh man, we got it made. Russia has already lost. Don't worry about it. And so Bill Burns, as gullible apparently as Mike Waltz, goes up to Helsinki and says, Mr. President, good news. President Biden at the time, of course, he says, I just was with Zelensky, and he says, Avril Haines is right. Russia has already lost. Biden gets up, major speech. Yeah, it was Helsinki, I think. He says, good news, you guys, for the whole world. Russia has already lost. Insanity. I mean, all you need to do is look at a map, for God's sake. All you had a rudimentary knowledge of military strategy to realize that Ukraine could never, ever, ever win, and that the Russians had an indigenous capability that won't quit. And now, of course, it's in full use. And I fully expect for the first time that with all these embarrassing attacks on the Amazon equivalent warehouses, that Putin for once, and this is a new judgment for me, I think since this guy's a Oreshnik, they'd be tempted to use it on a decision-making center in Kiev. And that's why he's warning. That's why he's warning everyone, and Lavrov as well. Look, we told you to get out of Dodge, get out of town a month ago. Maybe you ought to do that because we have this capability. We're going to use it. Where I depart from a lot of my fellow analysts is simply that I don't think there's any profit in Putin using whatever missilery or drones against NATO countries. And I think we've discussed this again. The cost benefit is just doesn't work for Putin. NATO is nothing without the United States. Why do anything to provoke a country like Estonia with attack on Estonia bases if they were used to shoot drones into Russia, which they're not. But if that happened, what would that mean? Well, would Trump react if Estonia said, "Oh, Article 5, or one is attacked, we're all attacked. Let's go." Again, Putin would be consulting his advisors and saying, "What do you think the chances are? 10%. What are the chances are that Trump would be sucked into this 10%?" So, well, now you told me last week, you head of the psychological division of the SRV, you said that. How did you describe Trump to me again? Tell the rest of them. Completely unpredictable, mercurial, just emotional. We've given up trying to predict what he does. Oh, okay. So you say 10%? It's not. That's too high, for God's sake. We don't have to do that, for God's sake. And so I think Europe, those bases that make these weapons in Europe, are safe for the nonce, mostly because Putin doesn't have to do that, and the risks that he would take, even though minimal in everybody's view, it would not be worth the danger that a mercurial and unpredictable Trump would react, and NATO would be reinvigorated, and that's the last thing the Russians want. The Russians have been looking on. People say, oh, Russia destroyed NATO. No, NATO destroyed NATO, and Trump played a big role in that when he said, all right, no more money, and no more real support. The one fly in the ointment, of course, is intelligence support. And Peskov just 2 hours ago had a statement on that, which we could talk about later if you wish to continue on Ukraine.
Yeah, Ray. Let me get back a little bit to what's going on in the West Asia, which is so critical right now. The problem is that there was no war between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, but right now there is something going on. And Saudi Arabia, many people were confused with the Saudi attack on Yemen, Sana'a International Airport, and later on the port in Hodeidah. This is something, when you look at the attack, do you think it's coming from their decision? The Saudi decision, it comes from some sort of pressure from Washington. What is that? Because nobody understands the situation for Saudi Arabia is so fragile, as I've mentioned, because of this Strait of Hormuz. The only country, I would say, that was able to export oil and gas and other, energy products, it was Saudi Arabia because of their access to the Red Sea. Right now, they did something so stupid, in my opinion, against Yemen that they're backfiring on them. The attack on Aramco, I don't know how long does it take to repair that, devastation in Aramco on pipeline. There were some reports yesterday on the pipeline, Yanbu pipeline and the port. This is the new face of the Middle East and the new face of the war. What is your understanding on Saudi Arabia?
Well, let's draw an analogy between what I was just discussing, where the United States and Boris Johnson and others told the Ukrainians, yeah, give them a bloody nose, give them a strategic defeat, and we will be with you for as long as it takes. We wanted that war to continue because U.S. administration, saw it as a way to weaken Russia. And, if you had any doubts about that, well, our inept defense minister at the time, General Austin, said, this is really about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia. So anyhow, here's the parallel here. Somebody wants this war to continue. Oh, I think that might be the Israelis. I think it might be the Israeli supporters in Washington. And what did they tell these dumb people in Saudi Arabia? We'll be with you for as long as it takes. You've got no alternative. You want to deal with those Iranians? Oh, you can't trust those Iranians. Of course, in my view, you can. And the Saudis are not going to emerge from this without working out some kind of deal with the Iranians. So, it's a mixture of moral turpitude, ineptitude, and inability to look at the U.S. patron and do anything other than say, well, it's worked in the past. My God, do we want to have to deal with those Iranians, those Shia? My God, no. We'll hang on here. And that's where I went like this, where you started explaining what the Saudis did. It was crazy. I mean, these people were coming back from the funeral in Tehran, right? And so they bombed the airfield. They couldn't land. Okay, a lot of them were sick, that heat stroke. So they finally had to bring some of them back to Tehran for medical treatment, but they landed at a different airport. Now, why the hell would the Saudis do that? Maybe there was an odd guy in their Air Force that said, oh, this would be a fun thing to do. But then the Iranians retaliated. And of course, what you had was a tit for tat. First, if I recall correctly, the Iranians hit two ships that tried to get out of the Bab el Mandab. And there was so the latest, of course, we have those ships hit and the strikes on Aramco. Now, maybe it was hubris. Aramco, my God, that's sort of like the Holy Trinity. I mean, you don't attack Chevron. That's American. That's Aramco. Yes, that has a history. Well, the history is in the history books now. It's a new situation. Aramco was struck. I don't know what the bomb damage assessment is this morning, but I imagine it's substantial, that the damage inflicted. And so is this thing going to go up and up and up? Well, thankfully, you need two to tango, and the U.S. doesn't have any weapons to either offensively proceed or defensively Patriot missile defense. So we're at a little quiescent time now. And I think the Russians and the Pakistanis and the Qataris and the Chinese are trying to get together with people who have level heads. You won't find many in Europe. There are a couple maybe in Washington, and say, look, you have to read the handwriting on the wall. Handwriting on the wall is, we control the straits, and you're not going to get them open without honoring some points in those 14 points memorandum. You play fast and loose with that, just so that you could get a kind of a ceasefire. And we profited from that to the tune of several $billion. So all those oil that got right out of it. But now it's a new situation. And look, the Houthis didn't move until they were provoked. Now they're really provoked. And in many ways, they've shown that they can defeat Saudi Arabia, despite 12 years of quarantine or embargo or whatever. So the Houthis are a tough bunch, and they have not only hit things like Aramco yesterday, but they've shown the capability to hit Israel as well. I think one of their missiles hit what's that big port up there in northern Israel a couple of months ago. So,
Ray,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay. Oh, you were out for a second. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a great big port and oil refinery export facility there in northern Israel. Can't remember the name of the city right now, but if memory serves, the Houthis actually have the range and
In Haifa, Ray, in Haifa, you mean?
Haifa, yeah. Didn't they hit Haifa?
Yeah, they hit Haifa.
So Israelis have to worry about what happens. Now, I think that we have to remember Netanyahu is coming to Washington on Tuesday, I believe. My God. And then he's going to go down to Lindsey Graham's funeral in South Carolina. That will be critical. Those will be talks that either will remain in this la-la land of continuing the war and in the impending depression in the world economy, or try to figure out some sort of deal. And, I think Iranians are willing to deal, but they're not willing to deal in a way that the U.S. thinks it has the advantage, that it can support Israel for as long as it takes. I think this is an entirely new situation. I think just as in Ukraine, with respect to West Asia, this is as long as it takes. That strait has to be opened. So does the Bab al-Mandab into the Red Sea, or else the world is in a really tough situation with millions dying of hunger, among other things. So, yeah. So what's going to happen? Well, Arachi still says that we'll never have refused to talk, but we're not going to talk under these conditions, if I have that right. The Russians have said we'll facilitate whatever talks are necessary. Just another word: the nuclear issue. That's a red herring. that can be dealt with easily. It was dealt with easily 11 years ago in the JCPOA. The Russians helped. The Russians took 90+% of that highly enriched uranium to themselves under safeguards. That can be easily done. The rub, the fly in the ointment is there are people in the United States that do not want this war to end, okay? They want to pursue Israel's objectives, and they don't quite see how the situation is very different from what it has been over the last several decades. Israel is no longer able to prevail, and by extension, the U.S. is no longer able to prevail, partly because they're running out of ammunition. Did I say that before? Yeah, well, let me say it one more time. When you run out of ammunition, well, you have to tuck tail and make the best deal that you can. One extraneous factor here. I was surprised as hell 4 years ago when Russia concluded a mutual defense treaty with North Korea.